Hello, and welcome to the ThriveCast interview series. I'm your host, Lisa Kember, and today I'm joined by Lisa Genovese, who is one of the owners at BottomLine Agency, or we are BottomLine Agency based in Calgary. Lisa, thanks so much for joining us. We're glad you're
Oh,
here.
thanks for having me. Nice to have a fellow Lisa on the line.
Right? I love the way you describe your agency, helping brands level up and get to where they're going faster. So why don't you kick us off with a brief background on you and your agency?
Sure, happy to share. So at Bottom Line, although we get put in the marketing agency category, we're really more of a research firm first. So we do research-driven marketing strategy for, as you've said it, growth-driven brands. And we really focus on using qualitative and quantitative data to help our clients either develop go-to-market strategies in new geographies, or sometimes it's more just traditional marketing planning, strat planning to take back market share in their current markets. And then we have an implementation division, and those guys handle anything from visual brand identities, web design development, and creative. So really bringing those strategies and those plans to life.
Awesome.
Mm,
So you've been at this a while.
a while.
I think I saw 2011 was your earliest. And then you've run a couple of agencies, from what I understand.
Yeah.
Two at one time, at one point, I think, for a few years.
That's
And I think probably some of the agency principals that we work with would feel pretty exhausted at that idea. Um, but what would you say has been, some of the challenges and the successes of growing businesses in the agency space?
Oh goodness, how much time do you got? So much to say
Isn't
about.
that the truth, right?
I think with growing agencies, it often comes back, in my mind anyways, to great people, working with great people, great systems and processes, and great clients. It's kind of that trifecta, if you will, those three pieces. In terms of challenges, oh my goodness, that's a tough one. I can think of so many things over the years, whether it was, back in my young years of being a young female in business and, trying to go pitch against the big boys. It wasn't easy. And often, being underestimated because of my age. And then fast forward a few years and I've matured a little bit more. So has our agency. And you get into, that's how to scale, how to grow, and the people challenges that come along with that. And how do you, develop leadership skills while, also trying to run a business while also trying to do these other things. And I've been on that point, I've been very fortunate to work with some great coaches over the years that have really supported me and my team in growing their leadership skills as well. Um, yeah, and then I mean I could go on, but those are probably the biggest ones that stand out as challenges. In terms of successes, I've been really fortunate to work again alongside some amazingly, wildly talented people. And we've worked on some great campaigns, mostly helping, clients get to that legacy brand status. So when you look at our portfolio, most of the clients there are, of course, we've got our big name ones, that household brands that everybody recognizes, but I'd say our pride and joy are the ones that we've helped bring from, a mid-sized company into legacy brand status. Those are my most favorite.
Love it. You're still passionate about the work, eh? All these years later.
It's fun. It's fun.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So tell me more about the advice you've gotten along the way. You said you've worked with coaches. I remember my very first agency. Same. It was the coach that I hired that helped me accelerate things forward because I truly had no clue.
It's fair. Well, and I think there's been lots of advice over the years, some good, some bad.
True.
um,
Isn't that?
I think, the things that stick out in my mind the most were, one's around how to put myself first and how to make sure that I'm not saying yes to everything. That's kind of my nature. I think that's women or female leaders in general tend
True.
to have a little bit of trouble with saying no.
Very
And
true.
so, a lot of that advice was, making sure that an opportunity is right for you and that it's a good values exchange. Um, Other advice around, how to lead people effectively. I've done a lot of work with my current coach. Her name is Fallon Groff. And she specializes in executive coaching, and we've done a lot of work around leadership, how to have a tough conversation, how to give constructive
Mm,
feedback, where it doesn't have to feel icky. Um, how to empower your managers to, coach and mentor and train, their direct reports. And
mhm,
it's been an interesting succession for me because I have managed more remote teams in my career than I have managed in-person teams.
mm,
So a lot of people say to me when they hear that we right now we run fully remote. We have closed all of our offices globally, and it's worked very well. A lot of people ask me though that, like, you're crazy. Why would you not at least have a hybrid model and go back to the office part-time? It's easier to manage people that way. And I don't see it that way. And I'm not sure if it's because I don't know what I don't know. But some of that has been from the support I've gotten from her on just building some effective processes around checking in with people, making sure that they've got the tools they need. We do regular team building activities. We have a professional development program. All of those little bits and pieces, I think, have contributed to, our culture and ultimately the team success. But I couldn't take all the credit. I've had lots of help.
funny, I managed one of my first teams was remote as well, and once you've done it once, it almost seems like it's the way to go. I mean,
Definitely.
I guess I could make an argument either way, but at this point, but yeah. So you're in Calgary. It's a smaller community. How often do you bump into competitors?
All the time. And what I would say is, and this is just my MO, there is no competition. There's just collaboration.
True.
And so a lot of agencies, we try to do work together and play nice in the sandbox.
Mm,
Had a meeting a couple weeks ago with like our direct competitor. They do the very similar work, follow very similar processes. But we get together for coffee and, share experiences, try to help each other.
hmm
Because at the end of the day, there's a few things they're stronger at than we are, and vice versa. And so we're actually now in discussions about going and co-pitching on work. And
Love
we'll
it.
exercise what they're great at and what we're great at and marry those two things together. And I think clients now are starting to appreciate that approach instead of, the big holdcos coming in and saying, oh, we can just do everything and we know everything. And, oh, don't tell this client that you're not on payroll. And it just makes me roll my eyes because it's not what's in best service of the client, and it's not how great work gets done. So we're
hmm
transparent about what's done in-house, what we outsource. I just believe in everybody working together and putting all the cards on the table so that we can do great work for the client.
hmm
Because ultimately their experience is what matters.
I think there's more openness to it than there was even 20 years ago,
Yeah.
right? That kind of more open approach to how business is done, not having to fake it in many ways. I remember years ago, my parents had a business, and they always were trying to hide the fact that they were running that business from home.
Right.
So, that's years ago now. Um, so you've you've focused on research as a core service. How did that come about?
I giggle a little bit because it was by accident. So I worked for an agency at a school that did marketing for IT and MSPs, and they didn't do research. Everything was like conjecture. All the strategy was kind of made up, for lack of better words. And it didn't sit well with me. I always would say, hang on, guys, like, we got to go back and at least do a little bit of research to understand the inner workings of this company before we just like lather, rinse, repeat and hand over a strategy for them. And their CEO and I didn't see eye to eye on that, which is fine. And so when I left, it was truly in the spirit of like, there's got to be a better way. And so for the first few years of BottomLine, whenever we would put together anything for a client, whether it was a website, a piece of sales collateral, social campaign, um, we would always go and do our homework first, but we weren't really charging for that activity. It was just something that we did as
Hmm
part of our process. And then you fast forward, 5 or 7 years into the business, and I had this epiphany and went, why are we not doing this as a formal service offering, and we do this for all of our clients. Roughly, we follow the same process. It's just not, packaged into an offering.
Right.
And so that's kind of where our impact assessment process came from. And it's gone through many iterations and many changes through the years. But it's now kind of the focal point in what we become known for that, where people will come to us now specifically for, impact assessment, or research help in general. And, the thing that I guess we do differently than a traditional research firm is a lot of times, they'll come in and go, okay, client, what's your challenge? Okay, yeah, we understand. Do the study design, complete it, and then come back with a report and go, here you go, here's all your insights. The problem with that, though, is that clients often don't really understand what to do with that information. They don't know how to then translate that into strategy and then strategy into execution. So we're kind of marrying those, well, not kind of, we are marrying those two worlds together, where we're taking, doing the research, helping them devise a strategy, and using that to inform their business decision making. So it's actually backed by data, and we're not just making it up and chucking spaghetti at the wall and hoping it sticks. And then, of course, executing on a plan that's been, backed by some research and some data.
I love it. But I would imagine early on when you tried selling it, might have run into some challenges. You had to figure out how to position it.
Big time. Honestly, if I'm being very transparent, it's only been the last several years where I'm finding that people are starting to understand. Partly that has been shift in the type of client that we work with. And usually it's those like mid-sized challenger brands that have a brand manager on staff that understand why research is important. I think one of the big challenges that we had in the early days is that we were still working relatively with small businesses. And so it would be the owner or the CEO or the president of the company, and they didn't understand marketing. They didn't really understand
Right.
why they needed research. So that was a bit of a disjunction that we've tidied up. And then I think, to your point though, too, is the positioning on why is it valuable and how does this help you get from A to B faster? And people are starting to refer us for that now. Hey, we saw you
Awesome.
do this for this type of client. Can you do that for us? But it took us a long time to get there.
I imagine it would, because it would be an iterative process to a certain point to figure out what would resonate with people and with different types of clients too, as you say, the CEO versus the marketing manager. Hmm. So we were on one of our thriving agency calls the other day, which brings together agency principals from across North America, and we were talking about what like the big challenges that are facing agencies right now. What do you think is the biggest challenge?
Ooh, that's a loaded one. It's kind of a conglomeration of a few things. So definitely, I am seeing this move away from AOR and
Hmm.
into more fractional based roles or relationships with agencies. I
Hmm.
honestly think we will see the death of AOR over the next 5 years. Agency of record.
Yep.
I also am seeing the common stuff like staffing challenges and staffing shortages all over the map.
Hmm.
And I think the other big one, and I know everyone's talking about it and it's kind of becoming a cliche, is AI and how
Hmm.
it's disrupting our industry. From my perspective on that side, I think the fear of it taking people's jobs, that's not the concern. I think more so what's happening is that clients are seeing it as a tool that they can use for their content marketing. I think they're going to get a rude awakening here in a year or two to find out that ChatGPT does not replace a copywriter, and it never will. But I think that that's a bit of a shiny object for clients, and they see that as a way that they can cut budgets, but it isn't effective. And so it's a conglomeration of a bunch of different pieces,
Hmm.
but it is a perfect storm right now. Agencies are having a hard time. I think that a lot of us who have been in business for 10 plus years can no longer really rely on our historical data to give us an indication of what's to come in the future.
Yes,
We're not
true.
like we're not seeing our typical seasonality. Any of the things that we knew we could bank on seem to have gone out the window. And so it almost in a sense feels like we're back in a startup and we're figuring out some of this stuff as we go. But I do think that it is in the end going to be better. So I think it's going to separate the wheat from the chaff a little bit, in that, and I know I've picked on big holdcos. This will be the twice
Okay.
in this call,
We're
but
all in support of that.
I do think that there is, that model is broken and it needs to be
Mhm.
fixed. It's going to take time and it's going to be very painful. But I do think as we start to move into this new world or whatever we want to call it, we will start to see where like clients are getting smarter. And to my point about, blowing up the AOR model and starting to work with more specialists in different areas, I think that that is in best service of the clients most of the time. So it's going to be a long haul for us to get there. But I think some of these challenges that agencies are experiencing, as much as it sucks, it's a good thing. And in the end, I think we'll all be better for it, and at least the ones that rise up from the ashes, but it's going to take time.
Well, after a period of time with how things are done, and this is forcing people back into that entrepreneurial phase again,
Yeah.
right? Where you kind of have to innovate and evolve and adjust as client responses happen. So it could be a great thing. Just short-term pain.
Yeah, for long-term gain.
So if you were to sit down across a coffee table with a new agency principal, somebody just starting out, maybe hiring their first one or two people, or just starting to take on projects where they need to partner with people, what would your advice be?
Hmm. Um, I think the biggest things, one is really think forward on where do you want to be at the 5 year and the 10 year mark. So be really clear with yourself on what your exit plan is. A
Mm,
lot of people, especially in the agency world, I find are leaving client side to start put their own shingle out, or sometimes they're leaving agency side to do that. But they are doing it because they themselves have that skill set to do the work themselves.
mhm,
And it's important to really think about, am I building, a small team where I'm still going to be on the tools in 5, 10 years? Am I building a big holdco? Am I building something in between where this thing should operate without me and I want to sell it in 10 years? Whatever the case may be, but start with the end in mind and then work backwards. I didn't do that, and I can tell you that it has been very painful to shift that through the years, as I've kind of figured that out as I went along. Um, and I think that'll also help you with the decisions you make around hiring. So you mentioned, hiring the first couple of people. You'll make better decisions around who you actually need on your team. The other thing that's been like foundational for me is understanding myself and what am I good at and what am I not good at, and making sure that I'm surrounding myself with people that are good at the things I'm not.
mhm,
So, examples of that. I'm not a strong finance person. Can I read a balance sheet? Sure, because I've had to learn how to, but we have in-house finance and it was one of the best decisions I ever made. The same thing on the HR side of things. I do not claim to be an HR expert. So making sure that there's an individual on our board that has an extensive HR background, that I can go to and say, what are we supposed to do about this thing?
mhm, mhm,
But I think that those decisions again get made with what's the end in mind, as well as again, what am I good at and what am I not good at? And
mhm.
also, what do I enjoy? Because I think in this business, it's so vast. There are so many different facets to the marketing
Sure.
world. Um, it's crazy. And I think, you can't be all things to all people. And so really getting clear on who are the clients that I best serve and what do I actually enjoy doing? Um, because you want to enjoy your day to day and not feel like it's
For sure.
punishment or a prison that you have worked
For
yourself
sure.
into.
So, just as an add-on question to that, what would you say should be the first hire?
Truthfully, that's a very much an it depends answer. I think it'll come back to like, again, what are you good at and what are you not? So I'll maybe relate it back to myself. So when I left the agency can stand named, but the previous agency I worked for, about a month in, my two of my direct reports from that agency came to me and said, "Hey, can I have a job?" One was a front end developer, one was a back end developer. Two skills that I have zero skill set in.
So that's
But
convenient.
yeah, which was great. So it kind of happened by accident. Um, and that carried us for a long time. The next like big hire I made was an account manager because I was much stronger in the business development side than I was the ongoing client relationship side. Not because I couldn't build the relationships, but because I'm disorganized. And so, keeping tabs on the project management piece was not my strong suit. And so hiring that skill set early on was vital. But I think the answer to your question will really come back to, again, what are we building? What am I good at? What am I not good at? Because if you're great at PR, for an example, and you're opening a PR firm, you probably don't want to hire another PR person. You probably want to hire if you have a deficit in project management or finance or fill in the gap.
Yeah.
That might better support you.
It's interesting because in this type of business, very often people are coming with deep skill set, like starting an agency with, you know, very experienced, very seasoned in their field of expertise. It's a harder model to scale, to your earlier point.
It's a tough one. I see it, although similar but different. My husband is a general contractor, so he's a carpenter by trade. And he has found it very challenging to get off the tools and move into, a more management type seat because being on the tools is what he loves.
Yeah.
And so he's been having to make recently some very tough decisions around what is the end game for this company because we've hit capacity on where we're at. I either hire people to do the work or I go into a management seat, or we stay at this size and we scale down a little bit so that I can, facilitate both. So it really ends up being, what do you want out of your life?
Yeah, I mean, business is a very personal decision, really. And I think it depends also on the type of work being done, but I think it's a common experience of people who start agencies that they get in, they dive in, they do the work themselves, then they're, 5, 10, 15 people later, and it's hard to extricate themselves. So
Yeah.
yeah, kind of a challenge. So would you do it all over again?
You know what? Yes. I mean, at the end of the day, the lessons you learn along the way are invaluable. Are there things, hindsight's always 2020, would I do things differently in some cases? Sure. But I don't think that I would have come to that conclusion if I hadn't learned the lessons. So, yep, definitely would do it over again.
Everything's an evolution.
Most certainly is.
Well, thank you so much for your time today, Lisa. It was great meeting you and learning more about your journey and building to this point. And to everyone watching, I look forward to seeing you in our next episode.